Hello everyone! Hi! For those who don't know me, my name is Clara and I'm the owner of this channel, The Ink Path, where I talk about books in English and in Spanish. Today I want to thank you for all the messages and views that my first video of the season received last week. It was a great start and I was very moved by every comment, and I want to thank Lucy from the Book Bell for creating the tag that I did, and you are all invited to watch the video again or do the tag if you want to. The tag itself is the Cozy Autumn Book tag. Having said that, let's start with the wrap-up, because today is a wrap-up. Today we are going to talk about all the books that I read in August and in September. Before that, I want to remind you that I have all my social media down below that you can click like if you want, even you can subscribe if you're new and you like my content. Okay, let's start. Okay, the first book that I read was, let's check, yes, The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow, and I have to say that this was an arc provided by NetGalley. Thank you, NetGalley, for the opportunity. Although by the time I read it, this book was also out, but I was lucky enough to find a copy on NetGalley, and it was granted to me. At first, I wasn't very sure about what it was about. So this is the story of January, a girl who, when she's around, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old, she discovers a door to another world, but she is very scared and decides to go back. From that moment on, she's very haunted by this older world and this threshold that she crossed, and she is still trying to figure out how was that even possible. At the beginning she thinks it's part of a dream, but then a few other hints here and there lead her to discover the truth and to find her father and her mother in the process. This was a very adult, quirky book, a portal fantasy kind of a story that is supposed to, or it's highly misguided as YA, but that has very matured topics on the content, and that discuss feminism and women's rights and women's as individuals. I really like it. I give it 4 stars, and I want to have my copy, my own personal copy, in fact. After that, let's keep looking at the screen. I read Residencia de Estudiantes by Susana Martin. This is a graphic novel about the life of Federico García Lorca. Lorca was a poet and a playwright, very famous during the 20th century. During the 20th century, we had a lot of kind of literary figures, very important. But Lorca is very famous because he was killed at the very beginning of the Spanish Civil War because of his sexual orientation and his political beliefs. However, this story doesn't deal with his work on a first impression. This graphic novel tells the story of Lorca from the moment he arrives to the Residencia de Estudiantes de Madrid, which is a student kind of housing building, very famous, and it's historically very famous because it was created during the, if I'm not wrong, during the Second Republic, before the proper Civil War started. I am not sure if that's the proper context, but if someone else has more details, please correct me if you think so. In this story, as I said, we know about Lorca's passing through the residency and who he met there. He met Salvador Dalí, the painter. He met Luis Buñuel, the filmmaker, the director, and other kind of very, very important people in the kind of artistic sphere of Spain. This is a very introductory and quick read about his life in the residency and how he connected with all these important people that proved to be very important, or at least equally important than him, and also about his first steps as a writer and as a poet and as a playwright. I really like it. I feel the illustrations were quite, not simple, but quite minimalistic sometimes, but you could actually recognize the important characters, the historical characters, as I said. But it's also very vibrant and very colorful to express this joviality, this happiness. After this, I listened to Cress. Cress is the third installment in the Lunar Chronicles saga. This is the retelling of Rapunzel, that even though it's not following the straight path of the story of Rapunzel, is actually maintaining a few links to the original story, which is not the same as the Disney story that it was portrayed in Tangled. I like it. It's not my favorite. It started very well, but a few issues with the pacing, and I personally believe that Thorn was not very well approved or very well developed, better said, and lead me to give it 4 stars. By the way, I haven't said it, I think, but I gave the 10,000 Doors of January 4 stars, and Residencia de Estudiantes, the graphic novel that I just mentioned, had 3 stars. This one, as I said, Cress got 4 stars because after that I read in August, the last book that I read was Zarza y Brezo, which is a Spanish novel written by the author Paz Alonso. This story is set, I think, during the 50s, I want to say. This is a story set in a rural area of Spain, a very rural area of Spain, during the dictatorship, after the dictatorship decided to be or to become more popular, or wanted to modernize the country, because in the first, I want to say, 10 years of the dictatorship, it was very cruel and very repressive towards not only those who lost their work, but to those families, and also very the dictatorship was very focused on establishing a new set of rules for its citizens. However, when Zarza y Brezo starts, we learned that Spain is trying to be more modern and to change a few things while being in a dictatorship. The idea is that at the beginning of the story we met Maria Teresa, who is the daughter of the mayor of this little village, and she has a very hated feeling, or a very heated feeling, a very kind of cruel feeling towards a member of this tiny community, and she has read a lot about witches, and she decided that she wants to kind of cast a spell or cast a curse on this person that she believes made her really wrong, and she wants revenge. So from that moment onwards, she is not very sure if what she did is the downfall of the village, because a lot of things are going to happen. And I really like this story. I gave it 4 stars. I love the way the story was told, how the society of that time, or more precisely the rural society of that time, was explained and was presented. It reminded me a bit of when my grandmother used to tell me stories when she was younger, and how the power was used back then, while having this kind of spooky, uncertain vibe to it, because we don't know if what we are reading is actually provoked by this curse that the main character, who is a child around 11 years old at the beginning of the story, was actually because of that, or it was because of the other matters. I will tell you more about it in a individual review. Lastly, in September I read 2 books. I read Coraline in audiobook format, read by Neil Gaiman, because Coraline is written by Neil Gaiman, and I gave it 3 stars. I have to say that even though I watched the movie a while ago when it was out, I adore the movie. I didn't remember a lot about it. I think I didn't remember anything at all. The thing is that when I was reading this story, I was constantly aware that I would probably enjoy it more if I had the age that is appropriate for this story. I would say around 8 if it's a very mature kid, or 12 if it's a very chicken-like kid. This is a horror story thought for kids, and I believe I would have enjoyed more as a child, even though I wouldn't have slept in a week. I loved the eerie kind of way that the story was told, but it was quite simple from my point of view as an adult. However, I love this kind of Neil Gaiman kind of approaches to infancy and the importance of one's family, and also love how the story was told. Neil Gaiman is great. He's an amazing writer, and he's very good at narrating his own stories, and I love that. And because of that, I give it 3 stars. Lastly, I read Fairest Levana's Story, which is the 4th book in the Lunar Chronicles, if we look at it kind of in order of publication. However, this is a prequel to the rest of the series. This is the story of how Levana, who is the villain of this story, became such villain. I gave it 2 stars because even though I like the story, and even though I like the kind of plot, and it allows you to understand how the ending of the story is going to go, because it's the story that precedes winter, I have this feeling that there's a very important detail in Levana's story that makes her feel and makes her behave in a cruel way. And I didn't remember that from Cinder, even though I remember that being explicitly said. However, that little detail that I cannot say here because it would be a spoiler gives me a very bad feeling about the whole saga in general, and about the building up of this character, because she could be cruel without that specific trait and specific characteristic. And I will tell more one day when I am able to do the review, mainly because it was a very personal thing, and that left me very disappointed in the end. Having said that, this is it. This is the end of the wrap-up. Can you tell me what you read during these months? See you next week, okay? Bye!